episode number 242 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. On today's episode, I'm going to talk about the power of visualization. You may have heard a lot about visualization, and if you're an athlete, maybe you were told to visualize getting a goal or getting a ball in the hoop or whatever type of sport you do. I personally don't do sports, but I know that many times visualizing a performance before it happens really helps a lot mentally. And there is also science to this. And not only does it help with performance, but it also helps physically as well. So in today's episode, I'm going to talk about how you can use this for your fertility health. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. So today's episode is all about visualization. So I have spoken a lot about visualizing, and we have this incredible asset, our brain, our mind's eye, that we simply don't give credit to often in science. And until now, science is definitely starting to catch up to a lot of what has been taught throughout history in many ancient cultures. And you can find in Buddhism, there's many techniques that really acknowledge the mind and acknowledge our inner world or inner terrain. Whereas in modern day time, our focus is more on the material world and what is outside of us. And now science is catching up to the fact that maybe there is something to this. Maybe there is something that we can do to utilize these powers, because literally they are powers that we have that are dwelling within us. And many times I find too, with my patients and some of the clients that I speak to, is that they're very interested and intrigued by it. This is actually something that definitely conjures up a lot of curiosity within people. Some people are a little more hesitant. Some people are more numbers people, and they like to kind of get science. But don't worry if you are like that, because I will be talking about that as well. And now, luckily, we are able to look at it from so many different angles. But what I find is that I personally think that it intrigues people because it is within us. It's something that wants to be awakened within us. There's this intrigue because we know it's true on some level internally that we are able to access something that's more vast than our material world. And that's really our internal world, and how that can actually play a role on our material world. Most of the time, what we try to do is control the outside world so that our insides can feel better. However, that is almost like treating a branch to fix the root. So the root and the trunk are really where everything comes from. And the same happens with us. So our internal emotions can actually impact, or our internal world, let's say, can actually impact our outside world. And when we try this out, now don't take my word for it, try it out yourself. Try it out with a couple of different visualizations after I go over some techniques. Nothing too crazy, but just really visualizing something that you really want. And Joe Dispenza talks about it. He says to rehearse it as if it's already happened, something that you can really see yourself doing and feel yourself doing. There's been so many books written about this, and there is a power to visualization. So ultimately, we just don't acknowledge it. There's so many things that our body and our mind can do that we just don't acknowledge. We just dismiss because it almost seems too easy. So I'm going to talk about the science behind it and a couple of different scientific studies that were done to show that it actually had a physiological impact. And first of all, I'd like to share this one technique, this one little exercise that I do often with my patients, or I do in workshops, which is I have people visualize a lemon and hold the lemon, smell the lemon. What's interesting is when you're smelling it in your visualization, you can actually smell the lemon. And that is what is so cool about it, is how can we smell things in even, for example, our dreams, and we can smell it, we can feel it, and it conjures up basically all the same things that our material world or certain elements in the material world can conjure up. And visualizing it, we can even bring a memory of a smell, even though we're not really holding it there. So that's one of the things. And then I have them smell it, and I have them squeeze it so that the juices in the lemon start to really open up. And then I have them cut it with a knife. This is all in their imagination. And then they open it. And then I have them take this whole lemon and squeeze it into their mouth. Imagine no pits. It's a perfect lemon. Most of the time, maybe like I would say 85 to 90% of the people I do this for, their mouth starts to water. Where is that coming from? This reaction of mouth watering, where is that coming from? Is it coming from a lemon? No. It's coming just by a thought of a lemon. The reason why lemons make our mouth water is because of the high acidity. It actually protects our teeth to have more liquids to dilute that. So there is a physiological response that happens, but just that exercise alone is so fascinating because you're getting a physiological response by simply thinking something. So that is an experiment of its own. It's an experience that people have. And sometimes it even happens. Pay attention next time you go to the restaurant. Sometimes when I'm at the restaurant and I look at the menu and I'm really, really hungry, I notice my mouth watering. Not because I smell the food. I mean, yes, you could smell it in the restaurant, but my mouth starts watering by reading the menu. So pay attention to that. That's something that I started noticing once I became more aware of just tiny things that happen in my body. So that's something to be aware of. And that is, again, another example or experience that you can have where you can see how your body responds to your mind. Research has shown that the mind doesn't really distinguish between something that is imagined or something that is real. So when we visualize, we're actually engaging our brain's neural pathways and stimulating the same regions that are activated when we perform the imagined action. So one study showed that visualizing movement changes how our brain networks are organized, creating more connections among different regions and priming the brain and body for that action. So they have actually studied kids that are trying to play the piano, and they would imagine themselves playing the piano, and they ended up doing better than kids that didn't imagine that. So it's like the brain starts to imagine itself doing an action and listening to it, and it will fill in the gaps to make sure that that behavior is learned simply by imagining it. So the motor cortex plays a vital role in connection between visualization and action. So when we think about our body performing a particular action, such as raising an arm or walking forward, the motor cortex is activated. So even though we're not doing it, we're just thinking of it, it is activated just like it would be if we were actually doing that movement. So over time, as we repeatedly visualize those actions, our brain learns and fine-tunes these movements. So it allows them to become more automatic and efficient. We also have something called mirror neurons, and it's located on various regions of our brain, especially the motor system. It also plays a major role in generating movement through visualization. So studies have shown that the same brain regions become active when a person performs a task and when a person observes somebody carrying out that same task. So the brain responds the same way when we actually see it in somebody else versus us actually doing it, which is fascinating. And these neurons may help explain our capacity for empathy and our ability to coordinate our actions with those around us. Now, here's something that I'm going to mention, and this has nothing to do really with visualization. However, It does have something to do with fertility. When sometimes people get into a mindset that they get resentment when somebody else gets pregnant. So then what happens is it's a completely valid thing. So I'm definitely not dismissing it. But what happens is the pregnancy itself, that symbol becomes something subconsciously that they are starting to resist, even though they really want it badly. Something to think about. And if you're also mirroring something that's happening outside of you and you're resisting their story, you're also resisting your own if you think about mirroring. So it's definitely something to think about. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong to experience that, because it is actually a very natural thing, because it just reminds you of the difficulty that you're going through. So it's just something that I do mention to some of my patients and clients, or it's something that I do see people go through for a little time and then make peace with it and soften up to the idea of feeling that joy, even if it's not theirs, because I do feel like there is that mirroring connection, and it could be another window. What I find often just in human psychology is that usually it's where you find the resistance in your life that could be a very great opportunity for an opening. So wherever you find the resistance or the triggers, it's an opportunity for growth. I know that sometimes people don't sign up for that growth, and it's not something that people sign up for in general is going through fertility journey. So I completely understand that and validate that 100%. However, I will say that life in general is always going to give you opportunities for growth. And even in Chinese medicine, when you become stagnant and there's no growth, that's where stagnation happens. And then that is usually where there's accumulations that start in the body, and everything in our body and in our mind and in our life, it's all something that reflects the same thing. It's like nature wants to grow, it wants to thrive, and it wants to move. So anytime you have that opportunity, just keep that in mind as something in the back of your mind. Hey, maybe this is a time where I can actually step into this, what feels like really challenging, and step into it from a place of power. So I often tell my patients when they're coming in for acupuncture, or even my clients when I'm talking to them virtually, to start a visualization practice. And you can start out slow. You could start imagining maybe your body having more vitality in all of your cells, and even imagine maybe a light enveloping you and comforting your cells, your body, all your muscles. And as you breathe, it expands, and as you exhale, it contracts and it goes back and forth, enveloping your whole body. And a lot of times when people do that, they start to feel more energy throughout the day. You can see this almost like intelligent white light penetrating every cell. So you could start out kind of more general, but then sometimes I'll have people focus on their womb, and they can also visualize their heart energy expanding, going down into their womb, enveloping their womb with love, or even imagine the blood flowing through into the womb, into the ovaries, and bringing lots of nutrients, healthy nutrients, to nurture the ovaries and the growth of the eggs and the follicles. And a lot of times I will suggest visualizing that before retrievals and then before transfers, really visualizing your uterine lining expanding, getting more receptive, and also getting more blood flow. So it's incredible how much the more you do it, it gets easier, because in the beginning, it really is a skill, and you'll find that it's like a muscle. The more you do it, the better you get. So some people might have a hard time visualizing. And if that is the case for you, I recommend speaking it as you're visualizing it. So if you're auditory, if you're somebody who is more connected to your hearing sense or the sound of words, and that speaks to you more literally, then you can also describe it through words as you're trying to visualize it. However, I wouldn't shy away from visualizing, even if you feel like you're not really great at it, because eventually you will get better with time. So doing that maybe for 5 minutes a day, you can even do it right before you go to sleep. You could just kind of visualize some way of like relaxing your body, or imagine like energy going into your uterus or your pelvis, or you can imagine your gut getting healthier and maybe your gut walls being stronger and capable of taking in more nutrients into your body, and all your cells functioning more optimally, and the energy is increasing in all of your cells and your eggs. So because your eggs are cells, and you can really use it for anything you can imagine. The sky is the limit with your visualization. You can even imagine a positive pregnancy stick. You can even imagine a growing belly, or you can go all the way to holding a baby, holding your own baby and giving birth. So it really, anything that you feel comfortable with. And in the beginning, you might want to start slow, something that's more easy to imagine. Start with something smaller. Maybe imagine some small goal that you have that has nothing to do with fertility, just to get yourself more warmed up to it. And also an experiment. You can imagine an apple, really red apple. I've heard some crazy stories about people imagining feathers or just certain random objects, and then all of a sudden it appearing in their life. And I like that because it gives you your own experience through doing that, where the more your mind is on board, because it starts to see that it actually works, the better, because then you're on board and your mind is that much more primed to being open to that experience happening. So I definitely suggest starting small, just doing little tiny experiments and seeing how that works. And you could literally apply it to everything in your life. Even if it's like an interview, or if you're about to go to the doctor's office and you're nervous and you don't know how things are going to go, you can imagine your doctor giving you great news, or feeling empowered, which is even better. You can really imagine yourself feeling empowered and knowing what decision to make and being really aligned with it. So the sky is the limit. Visualization is hands down one of the most powerful things you can do. And it is a superpower that we have dismissed. Honestly, modern day times, we just put so much more emphasis on our material world and not as much emphasis on going within. And we've been told for centuries that all the answers dwell within us. We've been told this for centuries. And the best part about it is that you have nothing to lose. There's nothing to lose by sitting and visualizing something that is important to you or something that really matters to you. And if it's too hard at first to visualize something that is so important, or you might have some pain that you're going through in specifically fertility, then start out with something that you're comfortable with. You can get your feet wet little by little so that you can ease into it. And it's something that you can feel comfortable with. And I invite you to do that, whatever really feels good to you, because ultimately only you know what is best for you. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you have some really interesting visualization stories, feel free to reach out to me at info@thewholesomelotus.com, or you can DM me on Instagram. I'm there pretty often, and I'm at the Wholesome Lotus Fertility. So would love to hear from you and your stories. I do get a lot of people reaching out with stories, and it really makes me so happy. I've had people tell me that they've found hope with some of the guests that I've had, stories and just topics, and some people with amazing pregnancy announcements that have been struggling for over 5 years. So hearing these stories really, really is so rewarding for me. And I always welcome hearing any stories or having my listeners reach out. It's always fun for me. So thank you so much for tuning in today. And as always, have a beautiful day. So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.